problem in not knowing how companies' ownership structures work.
We don't get the taxes we need to get if we don't know the correct ownership structures.
A few elites owning some of these companies tend to benefit, and the citizens in the country don't benefit.
So what data do we need? What data do we need to tackle all of this?
The percentage of beneficial ownership that some of these people have.
Okay, so what challenges do we have in accessing all of these types of data that you've been mentioning? Do you have it? Is it easily accessible?
Bureaucracies involved in accessing the data. A lot of the time with these national offices, when you apply for the data that is even available, they would like to take you through a very long chain of processes for you to acquire the data. I give you a typical example where in the period of the COVID, I wanted information from one of the ministries. Now, instead of sending a simple email, they asked me to write a letter with a pen and post it through the postal services before it gets there. And it's a classic example of the bureaucracies.
Currently, all companies coming to RGD are required to provide the BO. Otherwise, we can't even register you. All existing companies are also required to update us with the BO information. And all companies coming to file their annual returns are also required to provide the BO data. So some of the examples would be, who appoints the managing director? Do you understand? Because directors are the ones really directing the affairs of the company, the daily affairs. So who appoints them? Maybe the chief executive officer or equivalent person. You may want to, during your investigation, you may want to be looking at such things. Who changes the nature of the business? Nobody will just come and change the nature of your business. You must have significant interest in that business before the business nature of business can be changed. Who decides to go to another jurisdiction to invest there? Do you understand? It's not just the directors who but there are significant people behind it. It's there, they don't, So this is the definition of the politically exposed person in the Act. And you find both definitions in the first schedule of the Act. It says, a person who is or has been entrusted with a prominent public function in this country, a foreign country, or an international organization, including a senior political party official, government, judicial, or military official. Can be a person who is or has been an executive of a state-owned company. Or it can be a senior political party official in a foreign country. And then it applies to your immediate family member or close associate. So this is our money. This is what the Act is asking us to do, to keep the central register, to capture information on both the beneficial ownership and the basic information. And the law says that it has to be in a manual and electronic format. It's very important that it's in electronic format. That's why it took us a while, because it costs money and all that, right? But it's more important. That's where you can get your data, how do you call it? The open data and all that. So the registrar shall enter BO particulars received from the companies, okay, at the time of incorporation, after they've done amendments, at the time of filing of annual returns, and any information that the registrar too can request from the company. All companies in the country are supposed to keep a register of members. Once you register a business, there's an obligation, there's a requirement, this in the Act Section 35. Companies need to keep a register of members, but they don't. That is where it starts from. All companies, they need to have a register of members where they will enter the names of the shareholders, the members, all the members, secretary, whatever, and then provide the information, the nature of interest. It starts from there. Then within 28 days, each time that there's a change, the member, the BO may cease to be a BO. You have to enter it in the register and then inform the registrar.
Yesterday, in the discussion, there was an issue about foreign companies that comes in to establish companies, and they use Ghanaians to front for them. And when they are coming to, when you introduce the BO, the open data section of the registration process, they started coming to, give you the information that they are the actual owners of the companies. Now, if there is a company that you have the supposed directors are now giving you information that they are the owners, yet the shareholders are different people, how do you collaborate that information? Do you go back for them to give you the actual, information about the shares they owe, or they change the structure of the shareholdership aspect as well?
There's nothing wrong with that. That's what the law is asking. In the past, that disclosure wasn't there. In the past, we didn't have that, right? So in the past, it just ended with shareholders. So whatever you see, that's it. It's presumed that they are the ones. But now, because of all this fighting corruption, money laundering, all that stuff, they've provided a space for you to declare. So in case something happens, we have situations where someone can take over your company. You understand? Because you never declare that you are the true beneficial owner, and therefore it happens. They come to the registry crying all the time, but what can we do? Because they had a gentleman's agreement that, oh, you front for me. But if in this regime you've indicated that you are the true owner, when something comes, your name is there, right? That you are the true owner. So there are benefits to that.
The process is required that every year, annually, you file returns. And then in the process of filing the returns annually, if there are any updates or changes, there are also additional considerations or forms and templates that you fill to give those additional information. So and then it's also required to be signed by the respective directors, the form that you are completing. So the onus lies on you, basically. And in most cases, all the companies are also supposed to have their legal unit or their lawyers and others endorsing, like the secretary of to the board and others. Currently, the law requires that the secretary should be somebody with a legal background and those other things. So that authenticates for the data. In addition to that, the option is given, or we have the option of every year filing the returns, and therefore, if there is any change within the period, you cause update of those changes. So that gives the room.
So these are the particulars to be submitted, and you find it under Section 13(2)(m) of the Companies Act. We need a full name, former names, other names, any other name that they go by. It's helpful. Date of birth, telephone numbers, national identity card number, passports, or appropriate proof of ID. We want to know your residential, postal, email, including your digital address, place of work, position held, and then you need to disclose the letter of interest, including the details of if there are any legal, financial, security, debentures, whichever way that makes you give rise to a beneficial ownership. You have to disclose that. So this is the threshold levels that we arrived at. It's possible that it will change in the future because it was done. We're informed on the risk assessment and then the national risk assessment, the one that we did, and then so at any given time, if a particular, let's say the real estate, they are not really they didn't have a regulator, and that's why it was considered as high risk. But if they should have their own regulator, that means they have very good corporate governance, so structure, and therefore they may not be a high risk again. There are sanctions in the acts, of course. So it says a person who fails to provide information required or provides false and misleading information to the registrar commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of not less than 50 penalty units and not more than 250 penalty units, or to a term of imprisonment not less than 1 year or 2 years or both. And then also where a company, the company itself, if they default in complying with that section, the company and every officer of the company is in default, and they are liable to an administrative penalty of 25 penalty units for each day that the default continues.
The RTI law, section 75. I read a section here. An applicant seeking access to information under this act shall pay for fees or charge approved by Parliament in accordance with the fees and charges. Thus, the section 1, a fee charge shall not be payable for the reproduction of information which is in the public interest. And I know if a journalist is applying for information, it is in the public interest.
Let's take note that currently, even before the bill, if you need information on any company, you go to the Registrar General, make a payment, and you receive the information. So nothing really is changing. The risk here is that if you make a complete exemption of this, then it makes nonsense of the current regime. And so you want to ensure some consistency of the status quo. That is why I think that you need to agree on what minimum information becomes freely accessible, and the rest should be.
Good morning, everyone. Wonderful. So we're going to be having an exercise now. I've shared the scenario A. Okay, so every table should have at least 2 copies of each of these. The first one will have scenario A. This is the scenario for the exercise. And then the second one will have the key. So these are the different keys that are relevant for the purpose of the exercise. So the first key is anytime you see this icon that looks like a house or a building, it's a company, just a standard company, right? Now, when you see the icon with the arrow pointing up, it's a listed company. I think we spoke about listed companies yesterday and even a bit today as well. And then when you see a hand with the 3 pointing things, it's a trust. The handshake, it's, I believe, an arrangement, informal or legal. The flag just shows jurisdiction. In this case, the jurisdiction is Ghana, because that's the jurisdiction that we're all working in, right? And then this is jurisdiction, when it's GB, Great Britain. When it is just an arrow, it's direct interest control or ownership relationship. When it's a broken arrow, it's indirect interest. When you see a specific percentage beside the arrow, it signifies nature or strength of interest. And when you see a tick, it just means collect information about this person, entity, or interest. So this is the guiding, or these are the guiding keys for interpreting the scenario A that you should have in front of you. So do we all understand? Great. So we're going to go through the scenario A together. And I will crave your indulgence that you listen as carefully as possible so that amongst your teams, we can hopefully answer these questions correctly. So as we did yesterday, you discuss each of the questions. I think we have about 4 questions, or 5 questions rather. You discuss each of the questions for about 3 minutes per question. Come up with your answer. You'd write your answer or represent your answer on this paper. And then you will appoint one person that will come and represent the team. So we'll have 5 representatives here at the end, or 4 rather, at the end of the session.
hiding his company. Why? The truth is that the person owns the company, but doesn't want people to know. So investigative journalism searches for truth. There is so much lack of transparency in the system. We have laws for transparency, we have laws for accountability, we have laws for registering companies, public and private companies have their rules and regulations, but there is no transparency. If you look at how much even Ghana is losing to illicit financial flows per year, about $3 million a year. We expose wrongdoing. Investigative reporters do not massage the egos of powerful people. But more importantly, investigative reporting is in-depth reporting. Every investigative piece should be systematic, in-depth, original research. It is not he said, she said. It is not the word of the reporter against the word of the subject. So the police arrest criminals and then you go and report and the police say we arrested them for doing A, B, C, D. You didn't even talk to the criminals and then you reported. And then that report is considered an investigative report. It's not. So investigation must be original reporting as well and involves the unearthing of secrets. It's not about just reporting, but going beyond the ordinary information to bring out relevant information that is connected and contextualizes the news you are reporting. So, it exposes wrongdoing, holds especially the powerful to account, and also forces change. I've gone undercover to expose something. I must have a reason for that. Does the story serve the bigger public interest? Would it save lives? Would it save the country money? How much money? Is that worth trampling on the ethics for the bigger public interest? So that's the thing. What should drive you is, at the end of the day, are you bringing relief to your people? Are you bringing change to your country? Is it worth doing? Because as a journalist, your conscience must be awake. Your subject must be, the interest of your subject must be of concern to you. And that is why we give our subjects the right to reply. You cannot do investigation about anybody without giving them the right to respond to the charges. Never ever is that done. Investigative reporting is risky.
Please, I would like to know whether investigative journalists have sponsors. And there have been questions. For instance, if you look at Anas, the Cocoa story, the judges, some people are criticizing, yes, where did you get those huge monies to? So that's what I'm asking.
So there are reporting grants. There are organizations, NGOs in the world that have grants. I'm sure Open Ownership might have a similar program if they don't have yet. Ford Foundation funds a lot of investigative reporting work in Africa, mostly in Nigeria. Media Foundation for West Africa, they get funding from wherever, and then they fund investigations. So if I have an investigative report I want to do and I don't have the funding to pay for it, I will apply to Media Foundation for West Africa with a pitch and show how important that story is. And if they are convinced, they'll give me the funding. So in the two instances where I worked on the Rosewood stories, all the Ghanaian organizations that had funding for journalism did not give me the funding. I had to find the money outside Ghana. First time I found money from Nigeria. And the second time I found money from Burkina Faso. And that should sadden you.
The story Manasseh did with the, I think, GRA share and all that, because I think at the later point, some of the public commentary that came up was that the man in question had offered some monies to the journalist, and perhaps the journalist might have taken it. In fact, it was the man's word against his, and that I'm not in a position to say which one was the truth. But in such instance, there is issues of ethics involved, there is issue of risk involved, of course, vis-a-vis the fact that they are not paid much in the industry where we are identified.
If you refuse their money, they would know that you are a person of integrity, at least. Let me give you an example. When I was doing Pandora Papers, I sent my questions to the CEO of Amandi Ghana Limited. And then suddenly, I got a phone call. I was expecting him to reply in writing and send it back to me. And then he asked me, "Are you so and so?" I said, "Yes." "What are you investigating?" I said, "Well, you have the questions. Please kindly answer them." All the questions, we spelled everything out. Who is that Daniel Dolev in Israel? He is going to the owners of the company. Now he is confirming the beneficial owners without knowing. He could have answered the questions in writing. He wanted to see me. He wanted to speak to me. And I gave him the chance. So I was taking notes and writing everything. Now, what that told me was that this man has been in Ghana for 10 years. He knows the terrain. He knows how to kill stories. He knows Ghanaian journalists are hungry. I was hungry that afternoon, but I refused to eat. You see, you need a certain level of, I don't want to say integrity, to do these kinds of things. You need to know your own value and know what you stand for. If money is what you're looking for, then investigative journalism is the wrong field for you.
So in situations when you cannot verify the facts, what do you do? It's the question that I hope this presentation will help us to address. So this is about the project. You recall we discovered oil in 2007. And then in 2008, we held a national conference to harvest ideas into the governance framework for the sector. And it is the right thing to do because any country that discovers a natural resource, you need to vision how or what role you expect that resource to play in your national economy. We extract resources for various reasons. It could be for the revenue, but it could also be for domestic use. And in this particular case, even though we're interested in the revenue, we thought that the gas was of greater importance to us as a country because it is the fuel that will ensure energy sustainability. So Ghana decided on the policy that is zero flaring, that we will not allow our gas to be flared. We'll harvest everything and utilize it for power generation and also for use as domestic fuel. Okay, so how did the project become of interest to us? The contract between Sinopec and Ghana Gas Company was not submitted to Parliament for ratification. You know the Constitution, that's Article 181, Section 5, actually requires that any contract involving an international party must be brought to Parliament for ratification. This agreement was signed somewhere in 2011 or so, 2012, but it was never brought to Parliament. It was in 2016 when the Minister for Finance brought documents to Parliament asking for Parliament to grant tax waivers for the project. So assuming Parliament refused to grant the tax waivers, how were we going to find the contractors to take our money back? They've already enjoyed the tax waivers. So it is this particular aspect of the whole contract that attracted our attention. Our strategy was to put what we have out there and raise questions around it. Now, once we put it out there and raise questions, then government responds and says it is not correct. So in radio interviews, then they ask, so what is the correct the correct information? And then government will provide the correct information. And as we listen in, we use the correct information for our analysis. So it was more like provocative. You put something out there, you provoke a reaction, and you are able to get the information you need for your analysis. We allege that Sinopec may have, and that's you choose your words carefully. We didn't say Sinopec had. We were not categorical. We said may have succeeded in shortchanging Ghana by at least $140 million US dollars. The amount represented how much Sinopec was believed to have overpriced the liquefied petroleum gas processing plant, that's the LPG processing plant, and it was purchasing to install at Atwabo for processing of gas from Jubilee Field, and losses from the first year of production alone. So that's what we had by way of our own calculations. We discovered that the two companies were owned by the Chinese government from our search at the company registry in Dubai. 2, the director for the company in Ghana bore the same name as the director for the company in Dubai supplying the equipment. This then confirms a potential transfer pricing manipulation within the context of the project. There's a rule governing transfer pricing. It's not like it's a prohibited type of arrangement, but you need to disclose. And the cost will have to be fixed at arm's length. So you buy from SAF at the same price you would have bought from any other company on the market. But we realized that the prices were way, way above the market values, and therefore it raised further concerns. But we would not have actually detected that there was transfer mispricing going on between Sinopec and SAF if we hadn't known that they were related party transactions. So this is a typical way in which beneficial ownership information helps you to uncover transfer pricing or illicit financial flows in any sector of the economy. Once you get to know through your BO search that the two companies trading between themselves are related, that signals that there is some potential transfer pricing manipulation that ought to be investigated. BO information is useful for several purposes. And so we need to be mindful of ways in which it can support the work we do. One could be to help unravel procurement fraud, such as bid rigging. 2, to prevent conflict of interest in contract processes. And then to prevent transfer pricing manipulations, as we saw in the case of the Atwabo gas processing project. 4, it helps to also prevent illicit financial flows in commodity trading. Currently, there's a case which we are still looking into, but it involves tallow oil. And this is a straightforward thing. In the case of tallow oil, they pick our oil, crude oil production from their field. According to them, they don't trade it themselves. They hand it over to their parent company. And the parent company also gives it to a trading company, which then sells the crude. For tax purposes, tallow oil will quote the price on the day of lifting as its realized price. Meanwhile, they hedge their cargo on the world market, and consistently they've been making gains. So they achieve higher prices on the market, but for tax purposes, they pay less to GRA because they will use the price on the day of lifting. This is actually transfer pricing.